expected points, clean sheet odds, captaincy, and the best players to buy. This video has got all of the information you need to know ahead of game week 36. Alright then, we're going to start off by talking about the top players by position for expected points. I've got a 1 week and then a 3 game week view. So what's quite interesting now is there are only 3 game weeks left of the season. So the 3 game week view basically tells you the best players for the rest of the season for expected points. We'll start off with the goalkeepers. 1 week view first. Raya is top, 4.1 expected points. Bournemouth at home is Arsenal's fixture. Probably going to keep a clean sheet on that one, based on how well Arsenal have been playing defensively this season. Ederson is in second place, although he did pick up what looked like a shoulder injury in the game against Nottingham Forest. There's rumours that he might have dislocated it. I don't know. I mean, he played on for the rest of the first half, but did get subbed off at half-time for Ortega. So yeah, I think Pep is usually quite open in press conferences around the fitness of his players. And I think we'll know before the end of the game week and the start of game week 36, before the deadline at least, whether Ederson is fit to play or not. I think him and Ortega, there ain't a lot to split them. So if we get news that Ortega or Ederson's out for the rest of the season, for example, I think Ortega is a perfectly decent option to go for. So yeah, I mean, I'd proceed with caution around Ederson. We'll probably get some news from Pep. Pickford's in third place. He's done really well recently. Got a load of clean sheets. I think 3 consecutive clean sheets in the Premier League, and saves to go alongside it as well. Luton away. Luton absolutely fighting for their lives though. I probably expect Luton to score in that one, but Pickford is up there on 3.5. I'll go through the rest. Flecken, Sells, the Forest keeper, Dubravka, Martinez, Petrovic, and Muric against Newcastle are your top keepers. Alright then, looking over the next 3 game weeks, and again, I think the issue with Ederson applies even more here because basically, if he is confirmed fit for game week 36, Draft Town have him as the top keeper for expected points for the rest of the season. Obviously, there's a question mark as to whether he's going to be fit. And if he has actually dislocated his shoulder, I don't think we'll see him again this season. And then we've got Ortega, who is literally the cheapest goalkeeper in the game right now, who could play the next 3 game weeks for Man City. And I'd say, like I said, there's not a whole lot to split Ederson and Ortega, in my opinion. I think their expected points figures will be relatively the same. So, I mean, you know, if Ederson is out, the top goalkeeper for expected points is also the cheapest in the game in Ortega. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, basically. And like I said, Pep is usually quite open in his press conferences about injuries, so he should get some news on that ahead of the deadline. Dubravka in second place. I would question when Pope is due to be back. I just don't know when Pope's going to be back. I have a feeling it could be before the end of the season, but we don't know for sure. David Raya, despite not having a double game week, is the 3rd best. Petrovic, Verbruggen, who has played relatively equal minutes to Steele for Brighton this season. I've never seen a team rotate goalkeepers as much as Brighton have done, so can't really say that he's a good option. And with Villa and Man United alongside the double, and I think their 2 fixtures in the double are Newcastle and Chelsea. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just not sure they're going to keep many clean sheets. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't pick him. Pickford, again, only 3 singles, but he's up there. Vicario, who I don't think is too bad. The double game week in 37 and Sheffield United, who I don't like the look of that Liverpool fixture. Onana, Man United conceding a lot of shots, but of course, Onana making a lot of saves. Flecken and Martinez are the top keepers for the next 3. Defenders then, and for game week 36 alone, Guardiola is now first place. I just have a gut feeling that he could well start every game going forwards for Man City, although we know that is never the case with any of Pep Guardiola's defenders. I don't think you can say that any defender in that team is absolutely nailed on, but Guardiola's been playing really well recently. Obviously got a couple of attacking returns in recent games as well. Wolves at home, if there's ever, they're a bit weak at the moment, Wolves with injuries and issues going on. I do feel like Man City could keep a clean sheet in that one, but I would just proceed with caution around their defenders. Ben White, he's always the top Arsenal defender for expected points, 5.6. Bournemouth at home, like I said, I think Arsenal could well keep a clean sheet in that one. Gabriel and Saliba, you can see there as well. And then we've, of course, got all the Man City defenders mixed in. If they start, I think they're going to do well, but there's always the question mark if they start. And for the next 3 game weeks, well, it's dominated again by Man City defenders. Again, you just got to ask the question, which one, if there is one, do you expect to play the most minutes? Because with defenders, it's not like a forward or a midfielder, for example, where they can come off the bench and score you points. you won't get rewarded with a clean sheet for a defender if they don't start the game. Guardiola is top. Again, I think he seems to have nailed down that left-back spot for Man City, but Ake can play there. Rico Lewis can play there. If Diaz comes back in the team, Ake's been playing the left centre-back role recently, could Diaz come in and play that role, push Ake out to left-back? I just don't know. It's really hard to say that Guardiola is nailed on, although if he is going to play all 4 of those games, he's the top defender. Akanji, Lewis, Walker, Ake and Ruben Diaz are also up there. Shares up there, obviously carries a lot of attacking threat with him in that Newcastle defence, but did pick up a hamstring injury in game week 35. So, I mean, ultimately, we need information as to whether he's going to play. And Eddie Howe is not the most forthcoming when it comes to information about injuries. Ben White's up there as well, despite not having a double. Pedro Porro, Gabriel are your top defenders for the next 3 weeks. Midfielders then, and despite being out of form, Mo Salah is still the top midfielder for game week 36. Spurs at home, if there was ever a game for him to score in with how poor Spurs are defensively, I would expect it to be Salah. De Bruyne is up there as well. He's actually joint, to be fair, on expected points for Salah, 6.8, Wolves at home. Odegaard, 6.7. Palmer also on 6.7. Kai Havertz, 6.2. Foden, 5.9. Saka, 5.8. Gordon and Luis Diaz round off your top midfielders for game week 36. Looking at the next 3 weeks, and it's, well, dominated basically by midfielders with a double game week in 37. Palmer, De Bruyne, Foden, Gordon, Bruno and Son are your top sort of 6 midfielders. Salah, Odegaard and Havertz are in there, despite not having a double game week in 37. If you look at their total points across the 3, they're pretty close with some of those double game week players. So I think I'd be hard-pressed personally to sell Mo Salah if I already have him. You know, I just think his track record across Premier League history, he's a great option. And, you know, you got to ask in some cases, could midfielders or other players who only have a single in game week 37, across that period of time, could they still outscore double game week players? I think that's a question some people should be asking. Odegaard and Havertz up there as well. Brennan Johnson, although I'll talk about this in a second. Outside of Son, I don't think there's a Spurs player I'd say I'd absolutely recommend picking. But yeah, those are your top mids for the next 3. Forwards then, and Erling Haaland is top. Wolves at home for Man City. Like I said, Wolves strewn with injuries at the moment. He could well come back and do well in that one. Obviously didn't start in game week 35, but came on and scored a goal. I think he's going to be absolutely fine to play for game week 36. Isak, who is in incredible form for Newcastle at the moment, off the back of 2 goals against Sheffield United. He plays Burnley away. I think he could do really well in that fixture. Obviously, Burnley fighting for their lives, but Newcastle still have something to play for this season. They want to try and finish as high as they can in the season, in the league, sorry. He's on penalties with no Wilson on the pitch. I think he's a fantastic option. Up to 35% ownership now in FPL. Watkins, who I would say could challenge some of the double game week players, despite only having 3 fixtures for the rest of the season. You know, he's the top scoring player in FPL right now. I think he's a great option. Always is going to be a great option. Chris Wood, Mateta, Darwin Núñez, Alvarez, Morris and Jackson are your other top forwards. Yeah, if you've got some reason to go for a 1 week punt, 4.8 million for Chris Wood against Sheffield United. Obviously, Sheffield United already down. Forest fighting relegation. He could be a nice option to have a punt on. Over the next 3 game weeks then, we've got Haaland and Isak at the top 2. I don't think that's any surprise. Obviously, a double game week for both players in game week 37. Haaland just edging it. I think that's fair enough. Plays for a slightly better team and overall is probably a slightly better striker. Isak is very close though. Alvarez, will he get enough minutes over those 4 games to make him an option? Probably not in my opinion, but draft time still reward him with some good expected points figures. Jackson and Højlund, I think, are decent options when it comes to game week 37. I think ahead of game week 36 though, I don't think there's any point transferring him in. Watkins, like I said, I think he can honestly challenge some of these double game week players despite only having a single. He's got Liverpool at Villa Park. Villa obviously playing for top 4. And I just think Liverpool do not look good defensively at the moment. And I think Watkins could really punish them. I really like him as an option for that game. João Pedro, just question his minutes slightly. Werner, again, I'm just not sure he's clinical enough. And I'd also question his minutes. Chris Wood, I'd only really pick him with game week 36 in mind. Callum Wilson, who's currently injured. He's up there for expected points. But I'd really ask the question, how many minutes is he going to get? Couple of sources then for the best captain and expected points. Drafthound have Haaland top, 6.9. Very close though between him, Salah, De Bruyne, Odegaard and Palmer. 0.2 expected points in it at the moment, but they do have Haaland leading the way. And I think given he played minutes in game week 35, proving his fitness, I think he'd be fine to start in game week 36. And when you consider, you know, Salah's out of form at the moment, got probably a tougher fixture than Haaland does out of the title race picture, arguing with Klopp, etc. I think Haaland's probably the best captain. Gotta be honest, I don't think Game Week 36 is the time to punt. The same applies to FPL review, although it is a little bit of a less close tie between Haaland and Salah. There's, 1.5 expected points splitting them. Haaland 6.9, Salah 5.4, Odegaard and Saka on 5.2, Foden 4.8 and Palmer 4.7 are your 6 top options according to FPL review. Alright then, a quick look at the Draft Hound clean sheet odds. We've got 2 teams either 50% or above to keep a clean sheet. So that either means they're equal likely to concede or not, or more likely than not to keep a clean sheet. Man City 60%. That suggests Draft Hound are thinking they are more likely than not to keep a clean sheet against Wolves. I would just say they've shipped so many goals this season that I wouldn't absolutely bet my house on Man City keeping a clean sheet. In my mind, I still think Arsenal are more likely. They just seem to be that little bit more solid defensively. Nottingham Forest 38, Chelsea 31. Now, usually, I don't like to pick teams below 30% to keep a clean sheet, but there are so many below 30 this week, you might be having to start some of them with less than 30. So perhaps you could use these numbers and pick the defenders in your team with the highest percentage of clean sheets. All right then, on now to some players to buy. I've done some similar graphics in my buy and avoid video I made for Game Week 36, so I'm not going to spend too long talking about these, but the way I spread it out is essentially looking at all the teams with a double in 37, because I'd suggest those are the players you should be bringing in, and I've ranked their options for each team basically. From a Newcastle perspective, I think there are only 2 great picks, and that's Anthony Gordon and Isak. Burn, Cher, Dubravka, depending on their fitness and the fitness of Nick Pope, for example, could be decent picks, although given how poor Newcastle have been defensively for the last few months, and with Cher potentially being injured as well, I can only say they're decent picks. You could go for them, but they're not great. From a Man United perspective, again, I think they've only got very few great picks. Bruno, realistically, in my mind, is their only great pick. Guaranteed to start, 90 minutes, penalties, free kicks, and is probably the in-form player for Man United right now. Decent picks, you could obviously say Garnacho is a decent pick. He's playing pretty much every game. He's super duper cheap. He's just not quite getting the level of returns that Bruno is, but he is looking dangerous every time I see him play. Maguire, I mean, his goal threat's pretty good at the moment and he's super cheap. You could well go for him. Højlund and Rashford are decent. I don't think they're great picks though by any stretch. And Onana, just for his saves volume, I'd say is a decent pick as well. All of the other Man United players though, I'd recommend avoiding. From a Brighton perspective, I'll apologise to anyone that watched my buy and avoid video. I said that Estupinian was a decent pick, but he's out for the rest of the season, so you can't go for him. I think realistically, Brighton only have 1 player I'd even remotely consider picking. That's Pascal Gross. João Pedro is decent, obviously on penalties when he does play, but his minutes are just not guaranteed, and I just think you can do better in terms of strikers. Lewis Dunk is decent as well. Van Heck is, well, potentially injured. I'd say he's a decent pick if he's fit, just for his price. Lewis Dunk's probably better, though, for guaranteed minutes and probably carries a bit more goal threat. But Brighton have conceded so many goals this season, I don't really think I could say a defender is a great pick. So realistically from Brighton, there's only 1 player I consider picking, and that's Pascal Gross. From a Spurs perspective, I'm really pessimistic with some of these, but honestly, I think there's only 1 player that is a great pick from that Spurs team, and that's Son. Outside of that, I wouldn't say any of the other players I'd say are really important to get in your team. They're so poor defensively that I don't think you can bank on defenders to score you points. That covers, I'd say, Porro and Romero, the 2 most nailed defenders at the moment. Van de Ven's injury record just not been that great this season, so I don't think I can put him in that category. Vicario, similar reason to the other 2 defenders, they just concede too many goals. And then you got 4 midfielders, Richarlison, Maddison, Kulusevski and Johnson. They're all, competing for 3 positions, so 1 is always going to miss out. Maddison probably plays the most games, but his attacking returns have dried up a fair bit from what they were at the start of the season. Like I said, Richarlison, Kulusevski and Johnson are going to be competing for 2 positions between the 3 of them. I just don't think there's an option there between all of them. So for that reason, I think the only decent great pick from Spurs, I should say great because he's in the great pick category, is Heung-min Son. Chelsea, again, there's only 1 I'd say is actually a great pick. Obviously, that's Cole Palmer. Outside of that, Gusto, depending on his fitness, Jackson, Petrovic and Cucurella, who seems to have nailed down that left-back spot. None of those, I'd say, are absolute bankers to have in your team. They could be good, but it's not guaranteed. For that reason, I can realistically only say to pick Palmer from Chelsea. And finally, Man City. I think they've got 2 great picks, maybe a third in Kevin De Bruyne. I just think with his injury record, he's getting some early substitutions in the odd game. Obviously, he got subbed off in the Nottingham Forest game. I just think his minutes are going to be managed. His body just seems to be a bit more fragile than it has been in previous seasons. Pep Guardiola obviously knows and sees that. Haaland and Foden. Foden was obviously ill, missed game week 35, but I think he'll be fine for game week 36. Honestly, think Haaland and Foden are the only 2 Man City players I would categorise as great picks. Outside of that, I think Kevin De Bruyne is on the fringe, but his minutes are just a little bit too limited for me. Ederson, Ortega and Guardiola could be options depending on fitness for Ederson and Ortega. You know, if Ederson is out for the rest of the season, Ortega becomes a really decent pick in my mind at 3.7 million, particularly if you're on your bench boost. And obviously Ederson's decent if he is confirmed to be fit. And Guardiola's probably the strongest of the Man City defenders in my mind for expected minutes and, you know, likelihood of attacking returns, etc. But just given the sheer amount of pet roulette we've seen across the defence this season, I can't say he's a great pick. Other than that, though, I'd probably avoid all the other Man City players. Let me know in the comments, though, what your plans are with Man City assets. Alright, and that's the end of the video. That felt like one of my longer ones, but there was a lot to go through there in terms of expected points, players to buy, etc. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. Like I said, let me know in the comments if you're going for any Man City players that I haven't mentioned or any players in general that haven't made any of these lists. I'd be interested to hear it. If you enjoyed the video and want to stick around and see more from me, there'll be a subscribe button just here on your screen. Click that to see more content from me. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.